Hello, and welcome to the lecture. This will be the first lecture in an ongoing series of lectures. The title of the lecture is called To Think. If you haven't already, could you please get a piece of paper and something to write with, as you'll need it for a very short task during the talk. What do I mean when I say to think? To think seems simple. A thought pops into your head, you think about it, and then it disappears. However, it's more complicated than one might think. In this instance, we should be looking at thinking not as a singular brief moment within our heads, but as a beginning of an ambiguous journey that takes us somewhere we've never been, even if we've visited those thoughts 1,000 times. If we revisit thoughts with the same thoughts upon those thoughts, we become stagnant within our thoughts. Imagine having the same thoughts continuously throughout your life. Eventually, there comes a time when you no longer need to think or ponder anything, as you have accepted those thoughts as the ultimate. Not by exploring those thoughts, criticising those thoughts or putting those thoughts into practice, but through neglecting the opportunity to think. The ability to not think becomes routine. The ability to think becomes stagnant. The ability to think beyond the initial actually dies. I should add that to think is not about question everything also with why, nor is it about throwing oneself down every rabbit hole or even clinging onto every conspiracy on YouTube. There needs to be an element of conceptual control when pondering. Otherwise, a similar death occurs not in the ability to think, but in the ability to overthink. One's mind becomes cluttered with a barrage of information when the pathways that allow concentration to occur become so blurred that the mind itself is lost and it's unable to find its way home, no matter how many breadcrumbs are left along the way. In both instances, thoughts become blinded, the first instance by stagnation and the second instance by excessiveness. With that said, it is paramount to explore concepts within the chasm of your mind that lack clarity or understanding, that lack reasoning, that lack a divine or direct purpose. As we exist within a society that pushes for purpose and perfection and even entices one to think of purpose and perfection as useful thoughts, it can be difficult. A battle of justification takes place between seemingly useful thoughts and instant results and thoughts that seem useless, that do not provide instant results. One might argue that having time to ponder and probe your thoughts is a circumstantial privilege. And it's understandable. One might say, I need to survive, or I need thoughts that will instantly help me. I can't waste my time thinking about nonsense. However, maybe as a collective, we should ponder our thoughts more often and reduce the pressure of instant useful thoughts, therefore eliminating the golden objective of purposefulness, thus reducing the circumstantial pressure to maintain use. It is well advertised, that large corporations allow their employees large bouts of freedom to play and ponder. And through playing and pondering, minds are free as the body in a sense. A unity of exploration exists, one could say, and from having those initial thoughts or ideas, room is given to explore, experiment and play, which takes one's mind to uncharted territory. Time must be made to think. However, it is worth noting that the minds that are running freely are the minds that are running the world currently and placing the dilemma of survival upon society, where survival itself could be a thing of biological circumstances rather than social circumstances. Like I said, time must be made to think. An inward revolution of, say, conceptual freedom must erupt. It needs an opportunity. I would say one must attempt to remove the idea of obtaining completer thoughts and useful objections and play with uncertainty, extreme as it may be. I believe it's okay to ponder your death while you're alive. It is a beautiful feeling as the surge of anxiety warms the cavity of your chest as you realise one day you'll be nothing, while at the same time you think you may be something now. The mind will quickly adapt to the mundane and be submerged in frosted glass, unable to see, until the shapes behind the glass become so routine that there is no longer a need to see them. Eventually, the frosted glass is replaced with brick, and the shapes are quickly forgotten, as is the glass that you once pondered them through. And so is the world, essentially, where the shapes are something more than the shapes, and something more than you didn't get to discover. Kierkegaard and Nietzsche talk about anxiety stemming from the inner notion of magnitude of choices that are available to us. Instant pressure is placed upon the mind to make a decision in a moment. A decision that has consequences and happenings attached. An infinite barrage of unknown possibilities that could end up ruining your life, humiliating you beyond belief. However, they could be also enriching you in some way. With that said, the draw of distractions that are on offer reinforce comfort to a situation that dangles us by our feet. Dangles us by our feet over a dark, bottomless pit of ambiguity. Why think when other things can feed our imagination and tell us who we are to be? With science strongly suggestion that free will is nothing more than chemical reactions on our brains that lead us to believe we are making free choices or thinking for ourselves, which in turn causes us to act, I believe the idea of empiricism becomes wonderfully important to the development of thought. Empiricism, in theory, is that all knowledge is based on experience derived from the senses. If we are no more than chemical reactions that are responding to the outside stimulus, then our environment plays an important role in adding a potion to the cauldron of the mind. Therefore, we can't explore uncharted worlds from rehearsing or rewriting the lines from the same script within the same scene that we project into an audience that we think is watching. I think we should gently place the script upon the table and leave the scene that somehow we've been casting. It's okay to improvise. With that said, to run into every opportunity is an ample action that also clearly demonstrates an equal distraction from difficult and deep abstract, absurd or existential thoughts. Similar to a small dog barking at a lion, it is attempting to prove a point through a disguise of bravery to maybe mask a deeper fear. During a walk, a friend said to me something along the lines of, I'm kind of, don't know if I'm quoting him correctly, but he said, if you're doing the opposite to what everyone else is doing, then you're probably doing it right. And I'm not sure where he heard it or if he accumulated it from a variety of thoughts, but there's something wonderfully rebellious, absurd, and also inherently wrong about such a comment, yet in the same breath, it seems to make sense and sit comfortably with my mind and magnificently capture the idea to think. It reminded me of a quote by Rita Mae Brown. It read, I think the reward for conformity is everyone likes you except yourself. The saying there is safety in numbers makes sense if you were a buffalo being hunted by a lion, but it seems illogical when applied to human existence as we're not being hunted. However, it's evidence through herd mentality or mob mentality that such ideological conformity is present and exercised. But if we slow down and think, maybe our predator is not a lion who inflicts certain death upon us, but a swarm of wasps that slowly sting us with pricks of social outcastment until the pain becomes so unbearable that we run towards the lion. I would suggest it is against the interest of an individual to continuously occupy one's own mind with thoughts that have no real substance and enhancing your creative ideology. Over time, such thoughts find their way into the gap gaps between abstract thoughts that are yet to be connected. We'll call these idea invaders. Such idea invaders halt any connection being made between abstract and absurd thoughts until eventually all the free space that was being prepared to create genuine pathways, obviously resulting in new traits of thought, are overwhelmed and succumbed by abysmal inbred social rhetoric. Now we use social rhetoric, and this is social rhetoric. The way I'm seeing it is the tomb where the mind slowly suffocates and dies. There is no need for a wandering mind here. And I would suggest that by living within the dreams of people who go to sleep wearing parachutes in the case they were to fall out of bed is a wasted existence. Okay, so as I asked you before with the pens and paper, we're going to do a short little exercise. Okay, so for 1 minute, I'd like you to close your eyes and pretend that we are a hammer. That's right, a hammer for hammer and nails. We're going to pretend we're a hammer. But before we do, I'd like you to attempt to reject all the ideas you have about a hammer. So what makes a hammer? See if we can clear our mind of that. As they're your ideas of what a hammer is. And you cannot be something based on your ideals of that thing. You can only be something if you are that thing. Okay, so I'll give you a short amount of time, maybe about 30 seconds, to forget your ideas of what a hammer is. Okay, so we'll give you that 30 seconds now. Okay, so that's your 30 seconds up. And what I'd like you to do, if you haven't already, I'd like you to close your eyes and stay silent and think about what it is like to be a hammer. Okay, and I'll let you know when your 1 minute is up. Your time can start now. Okay, and that's the minute is up. Okay, so using your pen and pencil or whatever you have, please write down your thoughts about being a hammer. And it's important to be honest and write down anything you thought of during that 1 minute. It even if those ideas didn't have anything to do with being a hammer, those thoughts could be the thoughts of the hammer who does not realise it's a hammer. But again, we don't have to go too complicated as that, but if whatever you were feeling during that short 1 minute exercise, I'd just like you to write it down. It doesn't even, it doesn't have to be a lot of writing either. Now, over 1 week, I want you to choose a different object each day and spend 1 minute thinking what it's like to be that object. In fact, I'll give you a few moments to in fact, you can pause the talk. That would obviously make sense. If you're going to write it down, you can pause the talk and I'll continue and you can just jump straight back in. Okay, so as I was saying, over 1 week, I want you to choose a different object each day and spend about 1 minute thinking what it's like to be that object. And as I said, the object can be anything, but try not to think of yourself as you. Remember, you are the object during that 1 minute. And again, any thoughts that you have when you are thinking about being that object, please, write them down. And after 1 week, I want you to type those thoughts up as you wrote them down and create a short title. And after that, you should have a small collection of writings regarding the objects and kind of getting a better understanding of the world around you. And I'll let whatever you want to do with them, I'll let you decide what you can do. You can make them into a short book, or you can use them as other creative outlets and do something with them. But that's totally up to you. Over the next several years, our ability to think will be even more guided towards a one-size-fits-all thought demographic. There will be no room of individual exploration, as the thoughts one must have will be based upon the functioning of society, physically and virtually. For instance, the internet was a place of escapism, an unknown, ambiguous realm where anyone could be anyone, say anything, essentially go anywhere, free from governmental rule or societal judgment even. However, as society found such freedoms and it became more accessible, the real world social contracts that exist within physical society have found their way into the ambiguous spaces of the virtual world. And this has resulted in such an unbound world becoming bound by social ethics, moral obligations, and political ideologies. Views of contradiction towards police thoughts and actions are banished, removed, or outcasted. The same way space invader thoughts, as previously mentioned, creep into the gaps and destroy creative pathways. Stopping the development of thoughts, the policing of virtual thinking is also destroying the gaps between our ambiguous existence in the virtual world. Our virtual existence is mapped through algorithms and daily advertised back to us in the form of, let's say, suggestions and prompts until, ultimately subduing our curiosity and our explorative impulses that cause us to experiment and form ideologies of the world. We become stagnant in expanded thinking as we no longer search for new information, as the information we receive is the information we like. Our views are very much informed, but they are informed by the narrative that we search for. And with that said, there is a danger. And that danger is, after placing the script on the table, as we previously mentioned, removing ourselves from the scene and leaving the theatre, here's the danger that we've gotten into a taxi that has took us round the block and back to the same theatre. And upon entering the theatre, the stage looks slightly different, but there are now people watching the play. The draw to be known, loved, and accepted outweighs the option to think. And as we're back in the character, we step from behind the curtain, we pick up the script, and we read the same lines that had been read before. Thinking is a skill that many have not developed beyond such hereditary guidelines or repeated chapters. Thinking takes time. Thinking is hard work. To reach into the depths of your own mind and contemplate ambiguity is daunting. The task of contemplating ambiguity is itself ambiguous. But without it, we will be wearing parachutes while we sleep. Thank you.